Hello everyone. I'm really glad you're here. Tonight, I want to help you let go of the day and ease into rest. I know many of you use these videos to fall asleep, and it means a lot to be part of your nightly routine. So if you haven't already, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. It truly helps. Now, settle in, close your eyes, and let's begin. Story 1. The figure at the edge of sleep. 3 years ago, my girlfriend and I moved into a modest apartment tucked away on the quieter side of town. It was nothing extraordinary, just a 2-bedroom with simple charm and a cozy atmosphere that made it easy to call home. In those early months, we settled into a routine, growing comfortable in our shared space and building the small details of our life together. But not long after we moved in, something strange began to unfold. My girlfriend, who had never experienced this in adulthood, began suffering from sleep paralysis, episodes that left her locked inside her body while her mind remained painfully alert. They came often, once a week, sometimes more. She said she could breathe and move her eyes, but that was all. The rest of her body felt sealed, frozen like ice beneath her skin. Most troubling of all were the visions, dark figures that wandered silently through the apartment, pacing, watching, sometimes leaning over her as she lay helpless. She told me early on that this wasn't unfamiliar. When she was a child, her brother had suffered the same thing, episodes that would come at night and leave him shaken in the morning. Back then, she chalked it up to something neurological, something explainable. As a non-believer in anything paranormal, she didn't like thinking about demons or ghosts. To her, sleep paralysis was a disorder of the brain, scary, yes, but still rooted in reality. That was until the experiences started to grow more intense. At times, she would hear footsteps pacing in the hallway. Other nights, the figure would simply stand at the doorway, unmoving, silent. The worst nights were when it pressed down on her chest, leaving her gasping for air, as if gravity had turned into a weight only she could feel. Despite her skepticism, she began to fear the nights, and though she told herself it was just her mind playing tricks, the fear clung to her in ways that reason couldn't soothe. She eventually learned how to wake me when it started happening. Her breathing would change, rapid and loud enough to jolt me out of sleep. As soon as I'd sit up and touch her shoulder, she'd stir, freed from the invisible grip. She always described the figure disappearing the moment she came back into her body. What I haven't told her, even after all this time, is that over the past 2 months, I've seen the figure too. And I don't just mean vaguely. I mean I've seen it standing over her, bent at the waist, pressing down on her ribcage, while she lay frozen and afraid. The moment I noticed it and moved to wake her, it would vanish. Like a shadow cut by sudden light, it disappeared the moment I acknowledged it. I've seen it more than once, and each time, it became clearer that I wasn't just imagining things. The first time it happened, I woke to a quick breathing, just as I always did. But instead of simply reaching for her hand, my eyes caught something hunched over her in the darkness. Its form was tall, too tall, and it was bent in a way no person should be. Its limbs seemed elongated, almost spider-like. I stared, frozen by disbelief, until instinct finally kicked in and I touched her arm. She gasped awake, and as her body twitched back into motion, the figure faded, dissolving into the corner like mist. I didn't tell her. I couldn't. If she was already terrified by something she believed to be a figment of her mind, what would she do with the knowledge that I saw it too, that it wasn't just hers? It happened again the following week. This time I saw it from across the room. I had gotten up to use the bathroom and was walking past the living room when I caught sight of it, standing in the hallway, silent, still, facing me. It didn't move. It just stared. I didn't know how long I stood there, locked in that strange moment of shared attention. I did the only thing I could think to do. I looked away, pretending I hadn't seen it. When I looked back, it was gone. And again, I said nothing to her. How could I? I didn't want her to carry my fear on top of her own. But now I'm caught in a dilemma that keeps me awake even when she's not paralyzed beside me. Do I tell her? Do I confirm her deepest fear, that it's not all in her head? We can't afford to move. That much is clear. Rent is high, money is tight. and the process of finding a new place would bring its own stress. For now, we found a fragile routine. She wakes me when it happens. I calm her, the figure vanishes, and we pretend that everything is fine. But it doesn't feel fine. Each time I see it, I feel a little more like this presence is not just attached to her, but to the space itself. Sometimes, even when she hasn't had an episode, I catch movement in the corner of my eye, a shadow slipping into the hallway, a shape bending slightly at the edge of the kitchen. There's a coldness in those moments, like the air thickens just for a breath, and then it's gone again. I've stopped telling myself it's my imagination. It feels too deliberate, too aware. There's a strange thing that happens in relationships when fear is shared. You either come closer, or you pull apart under the weight of what you can't explain. I love her. I know that much without question. But each night, as I listen for her breathing, I also listen for something else. The sound of feet moving across our floor, the sound of pressure in the dark. I've become a different person in the last 2 months, more alert, more careful. I scan rooms before I enter. I sleep lightly. I avoid mirrors at night. I wonder how long I can keep this secret without it turning into something more dangerous. But I also wonder how she'd look at me if I told her what I've seen. Would she believe me? Or would she crumble? Sometimes, I find myself lying awake long after she's fallen asleep. I listen to the quiet and watch the shadows shift on the ceiling. I think about the figure, about the way it stands, about the pressure it applies, and about the way it vanishes the moment it's seen. I wonder what it wants, why it's here, if it's a part of her or something entirely separate. I think about the nights before this started, when we were just two people in a new place, making memories in a space that felt neutral and warm. Those nights feel distant now, like they belong to another life, a quieter life. If I could, I would leave, not because I'm afraid, but because I feel like we're being worn down, one night at a time. But we can't. So instead, I carry this knowledge like a weight in my chest, a secret between me and the dark. I've come to accept it, to live with it. But I know this isn't how it ends. Something will change. Either I'll tell her, or the figure will do something neither of us can ignore. And when that day comes, I just hope we're strong enough to face it together. Until then, I'll be the one watching the watcher, waiting for the next moment when sleep becomes a doorway and something steps through. Story 2. The creature beyond the truck. It had only been a few months since we moved onto that 11-acre property tucked deep in rural Texas. Somewhere between Yorktown and Smiley, the landscape stretched wide and uninterrupted, surrounded by the mechanical rhythm of oil pumps on neighboring plots, their distant flames casting an eerie orange glow against the sky at night. Our home wasn't much. A tiny, skeletal structure with no interior walls, no running water, and barely any electricity. We had to dig our own trench to pull power from the nearest pole, and showers meant holding water by hand. It was hard living, stripped of comfort, and in those early days, I spent most nights lying awake, not because of fear but because of discomfort. The kind of discomfort that seeps into your bones when you're building a life from splinters. But then, something else crept in, something I can't explain, and I wish it had remained only discomfort. The property itself had no address, no landmarks, no past. It was a blank slate. That should have made me feel safe, like I had left the complications of the world behind. Instead, it made the isolation feel louder. I'm not someone who scares easily, and even then I didn't believe in ghosts or monsters. I still hesitate to say I do. But strange things started happening almost immediately. Our phones would glitch out randomly, even fully charged ones. The camera on my phone would freeze or flash when I wasn't touching it. My car, a vehicle I had parked and turned off, would sometimes chime like the door had opened or the lights had been triggered. It was unsettling, but I blamed the heat, or maybe just poor cell reception. It wasn't until my girlfriend, who'd kept quiet at first, confessed she'd noticed the same things that I began connecting the dots. But even then, nothing could have prepared me for what I saw that night. It was late. I don't remember exactly how late, but the kind of late where the crickets have calmed and even the wind feels like it's holding its breath. I'd forgotten something in the glove box of my truck. What it was, I can't recall now. I stepped outside, barefoot, phone flashlight in hand. The air was thick with silence, that humid Texas kind of quiet. I opened the truck door, leaned inside, and started digging around. My flashlight beam flickering across random papers and the smooth edge of the dashboard. I remember being so focused on the search, so immersed in that tiny act, that I let my guard down. That's when it happened. I shut the glove box, swung the door shut, and turned toward the house, shining my light past the hood of the truck, and then I froze. My breath caught like it had been pulled right from my lungs. There, between the truck and the house, stood something. A figure, taller than any human I'd ever seen, 7 to 8 feet, easily. Its skin was a chalky, sickly white that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. Its limbs were too long, too jointed, like a puppet manipulated by broken strings. It didn't make a sound. Not a footstep, not a breath. I barely had time to process it before it moved. Fast. It didn't just run, it leapt, silently across the bed of my truck in one fluid motion. The entire vehicle rocked from the impact, as if a boulder had landed in its bed. I watched, frozen in awe and dread, as it cleared the far side and vanished into the darkness beyond. It all happened in 4 or 5 seconds, but it's burned into my mind like it took an hour. I didn't see its face. I'm glad I didn't. I still lie awake sometimes, wondering what its eyes looked like, wondering if it would have smiled. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I simply backed away step by step toward the house. I expected it to reappear on the other side of the truck, but it didn't. The space was empty, except for the heavy imprint of its presence that hung in the air. My legs were shaking. I wanted to bolt, but I also didn't want to turn my back. Eventually, I made it inside, locked the door, and collapsed onto the couch, trying to piece together what I had just witnessed. Was it a hallucination? A trick of shadows and stress? But the truck had shaken. I heard it. I felt it. That detail alone ruled out imagination. And I wasn't alone. Days later, my girlfriend confessed she had seen something similar outside the window one evening, tall, pale, watching, but she hadn't seen it clearly, just enough to know it didn't belong. She did some digging online. Turns out, there had been whispers of similar sightings around the area, humanoid shapes in the woods, pale-skinned figures darting across roads, strange movements in the night that no animal could make. The land had no buildings on it before us, no apparent history, but clearly something called it home. Or maybe not home, maybe it was just passing through. I tried to rationalize it. A prankster. No way anyone could move like that, not silently, not with that kind of strength and speed. Could it have been an animal? But what kind of animal stands upright and leaps like a gymnast? I didn't want to say it, but I had to admit it to myself. I had seen something that defied logic, something unnatural. I lived there for only another month before we left. I couldn't stay. Not after that. Every night, I'd lie awake, staring at the door, imagining the sound of something brushing against the walls or pacing outside the window. I couldn't unsee it. I couldn't forget the way it stood motionless, watching. And I couldn't shake the feeling that if I hadn't turned around at that moment, if I had stayed in the truck for a few seconds longer, something else might have happened. Something I might not have survived. I don't talk about it much. Most people would laugh or dismiss it as a dream or some sleep-deprived trick of the mind. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt, and I carry it with me now. Every time I hear a bump in the night or catch something in my peripheral vision. It's strange, because that property should have been a dream, our chance to start fresh, away from city noise and pressure, but instead it became something else. A place where silence turned sinister, where shadows held shape, where I was forced to confront the possibility that the world is wider and weirder than I ever imagined. I used to laugh at stories like this. Now I don't. I listen carefully. I look more closely. And when someone says they saw something they can't explain, I believe them. Because once, in the dead of night, on a plot of land lit by burning oil, I saw something too, and I've never been the same since. Story 3. The van that wouldn't leave. It was sometime in 2017, when everything happened. An ordinary year that would mark the beginning of a memory. I still can't let go. I was walking home from school that afternoon. The same routine as every weekday. My mum worked late. My dad was away on a business trip. And my brother, who attended college farther away, wouldn't be back for another 30 or 40 minutes. It wasn't unusual for me to be alone at home for a little while. I'd done it countless times before. Most of the time, I would take the shortcut, a path that ran through a quiet, enclosed area with very few people around. It always saved me a few extra minutes, and I never thought much of it. But that day, everything felt slightly off, like the air around me was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. At first, I didn't notice the man. He was just a few paces behind me, not close enough to alarm me, but close enough that I was aware of his presence. I was a young and naive kid back then, and I didn't register anything wrong right away. I just kept walking, trying to ignore the quiet crunch of footsteps behind me. It wasn't until the path opened up to the sidewalk and I saw the man climbing into a white van that my instincts began to whisper something wasn't right. The moment I saw that van pull away from the curb and start driving slowly behind me, my body reacted before my mind did. I started walking faster, then jogging, then running, and still the van stayed behind me, never speeding, never honking, just following. I turned down unfamiliar streets, doubling back and taking wrong turns on purpose, trying to throw him off, but every time I looked behind me, the van was still there. At that point, there was no denying it. He was following me. Fear surged through my chest, burning hot and fast, and I sprinted the rest of the way home, praying I could get inside before anything worse happened. As soon as I reached the front door, I slammed it shut, locked every bolt and latch, and drew every curtain I could reach. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I dared to peek through the window, and there it was, the white van, idling silently in front of my house like it belonged there, just waiting. I didn't know what to do. I was alone. I grabbed the phone and called my mum first. Her voice came through calm but urgent. She couldn't come home right away, she was still hours from getting off work. But she told me to go to her bedroom and get the gun from her closet. That sentence alone sent a chill through my spine. I'd never touched a gun before. I'd done archery at summer camp, sure, but holding a real weapon felt terrifying. Still, I did as she said. I retrieved the gun, then grabbed a kitchen knife for good measure. My hands were shaking. I was scared but trying to be brave. My mum was calling the police as I crept back toward the front of the house. That's when I saw him again. This time, outside the window. He was trying to peek inside, pressing close to the glass, and I did the only thing I could think to do. I raised the gun, pointed it straight at him, and shouted that I was armed, and wasn't afraid to use it. He froze for a moment. Then, without a word, he turned and ran. I watched as he darted back into the van and sped off. I didn't even realize I'd been holding my breath until he disappeared from view. Moments later, my brother came home, and I told him everything, my voice trembling. Together, we checked the security cameras. What we saw chilled me all over again. There he was, on camera, first at the back door, trying to get in, jiggling the handle, pressing on the frame. Then, failing that, he circled the house and came around to the window. He didn't knock. He didn't speak. He just tried to enter, as quietly and as quickly as he could. When the police arrived, they reviewed the footage and began trying to track down the van. Days passed. I tried to return to normal, but it wasn't over. That same white van started passing by our house every day, just slow enough for me to recognize it, just long enough for my skin to crawl. Eventually, the police found him. It turned out he was an escaped convict, high on drugs and with a history of violent behavior. I don't like to think about what might have happened if I hadn't made it inside in time, or if I hadn't had access to that weapon, or if I'd frozen instead of moving. It's hard to say exactly what his intentions were, but none of them could have been good. I still think about the way he looked at the window, not with panic, not with surprise, but with hunger. That kind of quiet, focused obsession that makes you realize you're being watched not by a person, but by a predator. Since then, I've never quite let my guard down again. I keep the doors locked at all times, I listen more closely to footsteps behind me, and I trust my gut. That feeling I got, that primal sense that something was wrong, saved me. It was the kind of fear you don't want to feel, but you should always respect. If you ever find yourself walking alone, and something doesn't feel right, don't wait to confirm it. Listen. React. Because sometimes you're not being paranoid. Sometimes someone really is following you. It's strange to think how ordinary the day started. Just a walk home. Just another shortcut. But in a matter of moments, it became a memory etched in fear. I haven't spoken much about it since, but it left its mark. There's something about having to defend yourself when you least expect it that changes you. You begin to move differently, think differently. The world stops feeling safe in the ways it used to. And maybe that's not such a bad thing. Because now I know, danger doesn't always arrive with warning signs. Sometimes, it pulls up in a quiet white van and watches, waiting for the right moment to move. Story 4. The forest sound that shouldn't exist. I live in a quiet, secluded area, the kind of place where the neighbors are spaced out by stretches of open land, horse pastures, dense woods, and long dirt driveways. We have neighbors, sure, but they're distant enough that their voices fade before they ever reach us. If you're not shouting at the top of your lungs, chances are no one will hear you. That's part of the appeal of living out here. The silence, the peace, the solitude. But on some nights that same isolation can turn heavy, even unsettling. One evening, not too long ago, I decided to take my dog Buddy out for a walk. It was already dark. I had misjudged the time, and the last trace of daylight had vanished behind the tree line. Still, Buddy needed his walk, and I didn't want to deny him. So I grabbed my flashlight and headed out into the night. As we walked, I kept my beam low, scanning the grass and path ahead. Buddy trotted beside me, unbothered, his tail wagging as he sniffed the cool air. I even spoke to him out loud, something I tend to do more when I'm nervous than when I'm relaxed. I told him to stay close, to hurry up with his business, and even cracked a few one-sided jokes just to break the silence. We wandered farther from the house than I'd planned, down into the darker parts of the yard where the porch light couldn't reach. I was already feeling uneasy, but I pushed it aside. Maybe I was just being paranoid. After all, this was our land, and we'd walked it dozens of times. But then I heard something. At first it was faint, just a soft, fluttering noise in the trees. I stopped walking, narrowing my eyes and turning my flashlight in that direction. It sounded like birds, maybe a flock disturbed by our presence. But the longer I listened, the less natural it sounded. The noises grew louder, more layered, as if someone was playing a recording of birds on a loop. It was high-pitched and chaotic, not like anything I'd ever heard in nature. My parents are farmers, and I've been around all kinds of birds, chickens, ducks, geese, even parrots. This sound wasn't any of those. It was like something trying to mimic birds without understanding how they really sounded. It was eerie. Off. Buddy had stopped walking too. He tilted his head, staring into the woods with his ears perked forward. That made me more nervous than anything else. My dog is loyal, protective, and a little chicken-hearted, but he knows when something's wrong. I looked where he was looking, shining my flashlight into the deepest part of the tree line. The sound grew louder, faster, like whatever was making it was drawing closer. My throat tightened. The hairs on my arms stood straight up. I didn't want to run. Not yet, but I was ready. "Let's go," I told Buddy, my voice barely steady. I didn't hide my fear. I didn't care. Whatever this was, I wanted to be far away from it. And then the noise surged. It didn't just get louder, it shifted. The mimicry stopped sounding like birds and started sounding like chaos, like distorted nature unraveling itself. It was moving. Fast. And it was coming closer. That was when I ran. Not a jog, not a cautious retreat, I sprinted. Buddy didn't hesitate. He ran too, keeping pace with me as we fled back toward the fence line. My flashlight bounced wildly with each step, barely illuminating the path. I didn't look back. I didn't want to. Whatever it was behind us, and I could feel it, not in my ears, but in my chest, like a vibration moving through the air. As soon as we crossed the boundary of the yard, the sound began to fade. The noise didn't taper off like birds taking flight. It just stopped. like someone flipping off a switch. The air turned still again, quiet, but not peaceful. Buddy stayed glued to my side, his eyes wide, his body tense. I opened the door and we rushed inside, locking it behind us. My heart was still pounding, adrenaline rushing through me. I dropped to the floor, holding Buddy, trying to calm both of us down. The rest of the night, he didn't leave my side. Every sound outside made him perk up, growl lowly, and nudge closer to me. I tried to rationalize it later. Maybe it really was birds. Maybe someone nearby was playing a prank, but the nearest neighbor in that direction lives several miles away. And that patch of woods, it's empty. There are no homes, no barns, no reason for anyone to be there. And even if it were birds, I know their sounds. I've grown up listening to them. This wasn't birds. This was something pretending to be birds. Something wrong. Something not of this place. I don't know what it was mimicking or why, but I know what it made me feel: panic, dread, and the clear instinct to run. What haunts me most is that feeling of being watched. That deep primal fear of something observing you from the dark, just waiting for the right moment to emerge. I never saw it, never got a glimpse, but I think that was worse. The unknown is a crueler fear than the seen. At least with a visible threat you can plan. With this, there was nothing to plan for, just the overwhelming need to escape, and the terrifying realization that the woods I'd always known, the land I'd always trusted, might be hiding something I wasn't meant to understand. I still take Buddy on walks. I have to, but I stick to the areas near the house now, well lit, familiar paths. I carry a brighter flashlight, and I never let my guard down, because even though it's been weeks, I still remember the sound, unnatural, urgent and inhuman. I know the land seems calm again, but that calm feels thin, like a curtain hiding something behind it. And I know deep in my bones that whatever made that sound is still out there, waiting. Story 5. Footsteps on the roof. My grandmother and I lived together in a small, quiet house, just the two of us and our dog. On the surface, it's the kind of place that should feel safe, cozy, aged, and tucked into a sleepy neighborhood, but something about it has never felt quite right to me. From the very beginning, I found it hard to relax at night. I couldn't walk down the hallway without turning every light on. I always felt eyes on me, like someone or something was observing me from just out of sight. That sensation only worsens when the lights are off. I've tried to brush it off as anxiety, but it's more than that. It's a physical reaction, a sick feeling in the pit of my stomach, a chill that crawls up my back even when the air is still and warm. The nights are the hardest. Almost every evening, right around midnight, I begin to hear something on the roof. At first I assumed it was just raccoons or cats, but after a few nights I knew better. The footsteps weren't light or random. They were heavy, rhythmic, deliberate, like a man walking across the roof, step by step. There's no easy access to our rooftop. No low-hanging branches. No nearby structures to climb. Whatever or whoever was up there had to be strong, agile, or something else. I didn't want to believe it was anything other than a stray animal, but that illusion was quickly shattered one night at 3 a.m. Our dog, a big girl who usually sleeps quietly at the foot of my bed, began whining to go outside. I hesitated. I really didn't want to go out, but I couldn't ignore her. So I grabbed my flashlight and we stepped out into the backyard. The air was cool and still. I tried to act normal, speaking to her in a soft voice to calm my own nerves. It worked for a moment, until I heard it, snoring. Not from my dog, not from inside the house, but from the shadows, somewhere just beyond the reach of my flashlight. A deep, unmistakable snore. At first I froze, unsure if I was imagining it, but it continued, soft but real, like something was lying in the grass sleeping. I raised my light toward the sound and immediately wished I hadn't. I didn't see anything fully, just a vague shape. The light didn't seem to land the way it should. The outline was wrong, shifting, bulging in ways that made no sense. The second the light touched it, the snoring stopped. I felt a pressure in the air, a feeling that made my skin crawl and my breath go shallow. It wasn't just fear. It was the kind of instinctual dread you feel when you know you've done something dangerous. I called my dog back in, not bothering to finish her walk, and slammed the door shut behind us. Even inside, the unease lingered like fog. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stayed curled under the blanket, my heart pounding, straining to hear any noise from outside, and of course it came. The footsteps on the roof, pacing, slowly, with weight. My dog, usually timid during storms or loud noises, growled low and steady, standing over me like a guard. She never barked. She never tried to go to the window. She just stood there, body rigid, eyes fixed on the ceiling as if she could see something I couldn't. I whispered reassurances to her, stroking her fur with trembling hands. Eventually the footsteps faded, but neither of us slept until dawn. I told my grandma about the noises, but she brushed it off with a strange calm. "Just ignore it," she said, like it was something that came and went. That bothered me, the way she said it, not with disbelief but with resignation, like she knew, like she had lived with it for years. I asked her about the blankets she used to hang over the windows at night, long before she became too old to keep up the routine. She told me it was to keep it from seeing inside. That struck me. She had never spoken like that before, never acknowledged anything unusual. But there it was, confirmation, in her own quiet way. I started covering the windows myself after that, but she warned me not to bother. "If it wants to look in," she said, "it doesn't need the glass." Her words haunted me. I still did it anyway. Anything to feel a little safer. But the thumps kept coming. Some nights they were light, almost playful. Other nights, they were aggressive, fast, hard stomps that sent tremors down the walls. My dog would growl every time, never barking, always watchful. Sometimes she'd crawl into bed beside me and stand there until the noises stopped, refusing to sit or lie down. That behavior alone terrified me more than the footsteps. Dogs know things. They feel things we don't. The worst part is the silence in between. The nights when nothing happens, but you're still afraid. When your senses are so sharpened by dread that every creak becomes a whisper, every shadow becomes a figure. I find myself listening constantly, whether it's raining or calm, whether the roof is quiet or not. The fear doesn't leave when the sounds stop. If anything, it deepens. Because if it's not pacing the roof, then where is it? The ceiling becomes a ceiling again, but the feeling of being watched never goes away. I don't know what walks on our roof. I don't know what lies in the grass, snoring in the dark, and I don't know why my grandmother accepts it so calmly, as though it's always been part of this place. Maybe it has. Maybe there are things in this world we're meant to live alongside without understanding. I don't want to believe that. But I also can't pretend this is normal. I've heard it. I've felt it. And every night, when the sun sets, I wait for the footsteps to return, soft, deliberate, and always just above me. Story 6. The Man with the Hatchet. When I moved to California, it felt like stepping into a new life. I had spent most of my years in Utah, where things were quiet, predictable, and largely safe. I could walk home at night without clutching my phone. I could explore my neighborhood without glancing over my shoulder. But California was different. Everyone told me to be careful. Friends and family warned me that it was dangerous to walk alone, especially after dark. I listened. I kept pepper spray on me, stayed alert, and stuck to public transit when possible. The Bay Area has its own rhythm, a little faster, a little rougher. But until recently, I never had any real issues. That changed one night. And since then, I haven't walked those streets the same way. I often took the fast transit train system, commuting several times a week from my apartment to different parts of the city. To get there, I had to walk about a mile along a paved trail that followed the edge of a quiet neighborhood and ran parallel to the train tracks. The trail had 3 access points, one at each end and one in the middle. It wasn't heavily populated, but it felt safe enough during daylight. Even at night, the path had street lamps and the occasional passerby. That sense of normalcy faded quickly the first time I encountered the man. The first time I didn't think much of him. It was around 10 p.m., and as I walked home, I passed a man digging through the bushes beside the trail. He was talking to himself, muttering words I couldn't make out. When I tried to pass, he suddenly stepped into my path and asked if I'd seen something, described it vaguely, gesturing with his hands. Something about a speaker. I shook my head and kept walking, heart pounding. He didn't follow me that time, but I remember how hard it was to shake off that feeling of unease, like he had picked me out of the dark and decided I knew something I didn't. A few nights later, I saw him again. Same trail, same strange behavior. This time I didn't stop. I said sorry without slowing down and kept my head down. I told myself he was just another unhoused person dealing with his own struggles. I didn't want to judge. I didn't want to be afraid. But instincts are hard to ignore, and they flared even brighter the night everything escalated. I was headed toward the station when I saw him coming out of the elevator. Just as I was stepping onto the escalator, our eyes met. He recognized me instantly and shouted, "Excuse me." I ignored him. My heart sank as I realized he was following. He caught up quickly, persistent and angry. I turned around and asked what he wanted. He again asked about his missing speaker, pressing me with questions, acting like I had something to do with it. "You were there," he said, "on the trail that night. You must have seen it." I told him firmly that I hadn't. Then he demanded to search my backpack. "You're looking guilty," he snapped. That's when I reached for my pepper spray. I held it up and warned him to leave me alone. His expression twisted, and for a moment, I saw something sharp behind his eyes, but eventually he backed off, muttering under his breath. I walked to the far end of the platform, called my roommate, and tried to calm down. But it wasn't over. As I sat on the bench, trying to stay in the light and stay alert, I saw him again. This time he was holding something under his coat. Something long. He thought he was being discreet, but I could see it. A hatchet, partially hidden beneath the fabric. My breath caught. I stood, raised my pepper spray again, and told him clearly to back away. He didn't argue this time. He raised his hands and retreated. I didn't take my eyes off him until he was out of view. My roommate called the transit police, and I stayed on the line, narrating everything as best I could. In the background, I could hear him shouting again, his voice echoing from the upper level of the station. Thankfully, my train pulled in right then. I stepped on board without hesitation and sank into a seat, my entire body tense and trembling. I didn't relax until we were several stops away. Even then, I kept watching the doors, half expecting him to show up again. That night, I barely slept. I kept seeing his face, hearing his voice, replaying the moment he pulled the hatchet from beneath his coat. I kept asking myself what would have happened if I hadn't had pepper spray. What if the train had been late? What if I'd been alone on the platform? It's terrifying how quickly a normal commute can turn into something life-threatening. Since that night, I haven't seen him again. I don't know if the police ever found him. I still take the train, but I'm more cautious now. I avoid walking that trail at night. I stay near groups. I keep my phone charged and my spray in hand. I hate that it has to be this way. I hate that I have to think about my safety every second. But I'd rather be prepared than helpless. I've learned not to dismiss my fears, not to brush off red flags just to keep things polite or casual. Sometimes fear is your best warning. And sometimes, the world reminds you just how thin the line between normal and nightmare really is. What scares me most now isn't the memory of that man, or the fact that he carried a weapon. It's how easily he found me again, how confidently he approached, how quickly everything spiraled. I wonder if he ever meant to hurt me, or if he was just playing a power game, testing limits to see how far he could go. Either way, the fear was real. The danger was real, and it changed me. It's not just about what happened, but about what could have, what almost did. The what-ifs echo louder than anything he ever said. And now, every time I hear footsteps behind me on a quiet sidewalk, I can't help but remember that night. Story 7. The black mist on the street. It happened when I was 12 years old, an age where imagination still runs wild. But something about this memory has always stood apart. I was sitting on the back of my dad's pickup truck, the tailgate down, legs swinging freely in the warm Georgia air. It was a typical spring day, vibrant and alive. The trees were lush, the birds were chirping, and the bugs were loud and relentless in their buzzing. I was waiting for my friend to arrive so we could spend the day doing whatever preteens do on weekends, riding bikes, exploring the woods, talking about nonsense. It was the kind of day that should have been forgettable in its simplicity. But then, everything changed in a single moment, and that day became something I've never been able to forget. I noticed the stillness first, the sudden absence of sound. The birds fell silent. The dogs that had been barking in the distance stopped abruptly. The insects seemed to vanish. It was as if someone had pressed pause on the world. I looked around, confused. There wasn't a breeze, not a single leaf rustled, and the silence felt heavy, unnatural, like it had weight. I turned my attention back to the street, wondering if maybe I was just imagining things, but that's when I saw it. A shape, black, misty, and shifting, emerged from across the road. It had no clear form, but it moved with purpose, gliding from one neighbor's yard into the next, as though it belonged there, as if it knew exactly where it was going. At first I thought it was smoke, a strange puff of ash rolling on the wind. But it wasn't. It was thicker than that, darker, and oddly solid despite its shapelessness. I blinked hard, trying to clear my vision, but it remained. It didn't drift like smoke, it walked. It didn't dissolve like mist, it thickened as it moved. I whispered aloud, "What the heck is that?" And as if it heard me, it stopped. I swear, even though it had no face, it turned toward me. It reacted. I felt its attention shift. It didn't feel like an accident, it felt personal. As it turned, its form changed. Where it had been narrow and shifting, it now widened, as though it was facing me head-on. I couldn't breathe. My chest locked up, and my heart slammed like a hammer inside my ribs. For a moment I was frozen, completely motionless, staring into something that should not exist. It began to move again, this time toward the street, toward me, slowly, deliberately. I didn't know whether to run or scream, but before I could do either, I heard my friend had arrived. She called out from down the block, her voice cheerful and unaware. I snapped my head in her direction and raised my hand. When I looked back, the figure was gone. Just like that, the world came rushing back. The birds resumed their songs. A dog barked in the distance. The buzz of insects returned, almost as if they'd been holding their breath too. I sat there, overwhelmed. My eyes filled with tears before I even realized I was crying. My friend walked up and saw me sitting there, shaken. She asked what was wrong, and I told her everything, my voice trembling as I recounted what I had seen. She didn't laugh. She didn't doubt me. She just got quiet, really quiet. And then she told me something I'll never forget. She said she'd seen it too. Not here, but on her street, just one block over. She described it almost exactly the way I had. The dark form, the mist-like movement, the eerie sense of being watched. She told me she'd been frozen too, and that the thing had started to approach her until her mom called her inside. When she turned around, it was gone. Just like mine. 2 different sightings, 2 different people, and the same thing. We didn't know what to make of it. We were just kids. But something inside us knew that this wasn't pretend. This wasn't a game. Something strange had walked through our neighborhood. That day we abandoned all our plans. No exploring. No playing outside. We stayed inside, watched movies, and tried to forget. But of course we never did. I never saw it again, not in that form, but I felt echoes of that moment in other places. Walking home late, turning corners in silence, waking up in the middle of the night with the strange sense that something is nearby. It's like a shadow that follows, but never fully reveals itself. I've told the story to others over the years. Some believe me, some don't. But I stopped caring whether people think it's real, because for me, it is. There's a kind of quiet terror that lingers after something like that. Not the loud, panicked fear of being chased, but the slow burning dread that the world isn't as safe or simple as it seems. That there are things that move in silence, things that see you before you see them, things that wait. Maybe it was a spirit, maybe it was something even older than that, or maybe it was some strange blip in reality. A moment when the veil between worlds thinned, just enough for something to slip through. I don't know. I may never know. But that spring day on the back of a pickup truck, when everything stopped and something impossible began, will stay with me forever. Not because I understand it, but because it reminded me that mystery still exists. that some shadows don't belong to anything we can name, and that sometimes, when the world goes quiet, it's not empty, it's watching. Story 8. The Pale Man in the Corner. When I was around 10 or 11, maybe a little older, my sister and I used to play hide and seek in our house. Just harmless fun, nothing special. It was one of those rare carefree evenings when the sun dipped low, but didn't fully disappear, filling the house with that orange-tinted glow you only get in the late afternoon. The living room, or rather what we called the den, was where we always ended our rounds. That room acted as base, home, safety, a place where the hider could run and avoid being tagged. We chased each other in laughter, weaving through the hallways and ducking under furniture. I had just finished counting and called out, "Ready or not, here I come," as I stepped into the den, heart pumping with excitement. But that excitement quickly unraveled into something else, something I couldn't explain. The moment I crossed the threshold into the room, I felt a shift. It was like walking into a different temperature, a colder, heavier space. I froze, suddenly alert. My eyes instinctively moved to the far corner of the room, the one just beside the old floor lamp we never used, and there, in that dimly lit corner, stood something. It wasn't hiding. It wasn't moving. It was just there. Short, pale, cloaked in something dark like a robe or blanket draped over its hunched body. No hood, no mask. Just a bald head and a face that I don't think I'll ever forget. It looked human, but somehow not. Its features were sunken, timid, almost as if it was surprised that I could see it. And I was surprised, too, so much that I forgot how to scream. I didn't feel danger at first. That's the strange part. My body didn't tell me to run right away. Instead, I stood there blinking. My brain tried to make sense of it, cataloguing its size, its shape, its expression. There was fear in its eyes, not mine, but its. Like it was caught in the act of something, like it hadn't expected to be seen. And then in a blink, it was gone, just vanished. No sound, no puff of smoke, no motion blur. It was simply there one moment and gone the next. I stayed frozen for a while longer, not sure if I had imagined it. My sister was still hiding somewhere, completely unaware of what had just unfolded. Eventually the game resumed, though my heart wasn't in it anymore. I remember I avoided that corner for a long time afterward, even walking through the room. I'd give it a wide berth, like it still held the echo of something uninvited. My mom noticed after a few days. She asked why I was acting so skittish. I told her what I'd seen, expecting her to laugh or chalk it up to imagination. But she didn't laugh. She didn't scold. She simply said, "It was probably nothing," in that soft voice adults use when they don't want to scare you. But her eyes told a different story, like she knew something but wasn't ready to say it out loud. For weeks afterward, I felt like I was being watched, especially when I was alone in that room, especially near dusk, when the sun dipped low and shadows started to stretch across the floor. I never saw the figure again, but I always felt like it hadn't really left. Just waiting, somewhere I couldn't see. I kept thinking about how it looked at me, not with malice, but almost with guilt, like it knew it shouldn't be seen, like it didn't belong in my world. And maybe it didn't. Maybe I had stumbled into a moment I wasn't supposed to witness, a tear in the fabric between our world and something else. I started sleeping with the hallway light on after that. The corner of my room became a new place of focus. I watched it every night before I fell asleep, convinced that if anything reappeared, I'd see it coming, but nothing ever did. Still, the memory lingered. It wasn't terrifying in the way nightmares are, but it was haunting, because it felt real, too real. I questioned myself. Was it just a trick of the light? My childhood imagination? Or was there really something, someone, standing in that corner? I didn't know, but I couldn't forget it. Years later, I posted the experience online, anonymously, curious to see if anyone had seen something similar. To my surprise, several people responded with eerily similar stories. Small, pale figures, often hunched, often scared, and often gone in the blink of an eye. Some said it reminded them of folk tales, house spirits, lost souls, or interdimensional observers. Others suggested it was a form of sleep-wake hallucination, though I was fully awake when it happened. No one had definitive answers, but knowing I wasn't alone brought me some comfort, a strange kind of shared mystery. Even now, I sometimes think back to that figure. I wonder where it came from. I wonder why it looked so scared. Most of all, I wonder why it looked at me like I wasn't supposed to see it. The universe is full of things we don't understand, layers we can't perceive unless the veil is lifted for just a moment. Maybe I caught a glimpse through that veil. Maybe it caught a glimpse of me. And for a brief, impossible second, our two worlds overlapped. I'm older now, and the house is no longer ours, but the memory of that day stays with me, vivid and undiminished. I don't know if I'll ever see anything like it again. Part of me hopes I don't, but another part is curious, because sometimes when you look into the unknown, it looks back, and sometimes what you see isn't terrifying. It's just lost, like a pale man in the corner of a room, startled that you noticed him at all. Story 9. The Woman with Wings. I don't believe in the supernatural. I never have. My mind is wired towards science and reason, and I've always believed there's an explanation for everything, even the things that seem impossible at first glance. I've dismissed ghost stories, laughed off urban legends, and chalked up countless eerie experiences to tricks of the mind or misunderstood stimuli. But something happened that shook the foundation of those beliefs. A single moment on a misty Texas highway that left me questioning what's real and what lurks just beyond our understanding. I still struggle to talk about it, not because I fear disbelief, but because even I don't understand what I saw. It was late, around 3 in the morning. My friends and I had been hanging out for hours, one of those slow-burning nights where time slips by unnoticed. One of our group lived in a smaller town outside the city, in a place called Wilson. We decided to drop him off first, just to get the long leg of the drive out of the way. After we dropped him at his place, we got back onto the highway, heading back toward our hometown. We'd taken this route dozens of times before, especially at night. But this time, something felt different. As soon as we entered the stretch of road between towns, a thick, creeping fog rolled in. It wasn't like regular mist, it clung to the road in patches, swirling gently like smoke, dense enough to reduce visibility to only a few yards ahead. The car was silent, each of us half lulled by the hour, and the hum of the tires on pavement. That silence shattered when we saw her. Right in the center of the grassy median between the two sides of the highway stood a figure. At first, I thought it was a person, just a woman, standing still in the fog. She wore a white gown, loose and flowing, her long black hair cascading down her back. But something about her didn't feel right. She was too still, too out of place, too quiet. I slowed down instinctively, my eyes narrowing as I tried to make out more details. The figure wasn't moving. Not at all. And then she turned. She didn't turn like a person. Her body didn't shift. Only her head moved, rotating slowly, impossibly like an owl, and when her face met ours, she opened her mouth and screamed. But there was no sound. Her eyes were wide and empty, and her mouth stretched farther than it should have. It was a scream of fury, of agony, silent but overwhelming. And before we could process it, she leapt into the air. Her gown wasn't a gown at all. It was wings, massive white wings that unfurled from her back like a creature from mythology. With one powerful thrust, she rose high above the car, her body eclipsing the fog-muted moonlight for a moment as she soared overhead. We were frozen. Not a word was spoken as I gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, heart slamming against my ribs. It wasn't just that she had wings. It was the way she moved, the force of her flight, the undeniable reality of her presence. This wasn't a trick of the fog. This wasn't exhaustion. This was something else entirely. She hovered above the road for a moment, then vanished into the mist. No sound, no fluttering, just gone. The silence returned, but it was different now, heavier, like the air remembered her, even if she was no longer there. I pulled the car over. We sat in stunned silence, all of us trying to make sense of what had just happened. Finally, one of my friends spoke. "Did you see her too?" We all nodded. None of us imagined it. None of us were asleep. The next few miles were a blur. I drove slowly, eyes scanning every shadow, every flicker of movement. but she didn't return. The fog eventually lifted, and we reached the edges of town just as the sky began to hint at sunrise. Still, no one said much. The experience sat between us like a passenger we hadn't invited. In the days that followed, I tried to rationalize it. I searched online. I asked around. I found whispers, stories from nearby towns of a winged woman seen at night, of strange fog and roadside apparitions. Most dismissed them as legends or hallucinations, the kind of stories that drift through rural communities like folklore, but they were too similar. The long hair, the gown, the silent scream, the wings. It made me wonder just how much we don't know, how much is hidden in the folds of the night, how many truths are buried in what we call stories. Even now, years later, I still see her when I close my eyes. That frozen moment when she turned her head, when her eyes locked onto mine and her mouth opened in that silent, soul-shaking scream. I wonder what she wanted, why she appeared. Was she trying to warn us? Was she angry? Lost? Something else? Part of me believes she wasn't meant for us, that we stumbled into her space by accident, and she responded the only way she knew how. The other part wonders if she's still out there, hovering in the fog, waiting for the next set of headlights to catch her in their beam. I haven't taken that road since. Not at night. Not alone. I still don't believe in ghosts the way some people do, but I do believe in that woman. I believe in her wings, her scream, and the impossible way she flew into the mist like a forgotten dream. She was real, and she made me believe, even for just one night, that there are things in this world we aren't supposed to understand, things that fly without sound, things that scream without voice, and things that look right at you from the other side of reason. Story 10. The Shadow Under the Trailer. I was 15 when I lived in a small trailer park on the edge of a pine forest in northern Louisiana. My mom worked nights at the local hospital, and my older brother had already moved out by then, so I spent a lot of evenings home alone. Our trailer wasn't much, 2 bedrooms, narrow kitchen, low ceilings, but it was enough. It sat up on short cinder block risers, leaving a crawl space beneath it just tall enough for someone to shimmy under if they were desperate or foolish. Most days it was quiet, just the hum of insects, the creak of the woods, and the occasional passing car. But some nights, something felt off. Not loud, just wrong. It started with a sound soft and subtle, like fingernails scraping metal. I was watching TV one night, the lights dim, and I heard it coming from beneath the floor. I muted the television and listened. It stopped. Figured it was a raccoon or a stray dog, so I brushed it off. But the next night, it came back. Same time, same noise, a dragging sound this time, like something was being pulled along the dirt just under the floorboards. I got up, pressed my ear to the floor, and waited. A low whisper, barely audible, seeped through the wood. I couldn't make out the words, but it chilled me to the bone. I went outside with a flashlight, knees shaking, and pointed it toward the dark void under the trailer. The beam didn't reach far, it just swallowed into blackness. I called out, half expecting some animal to scurry out, but nothing moved. No rustling, no eyes reflecting back, just silence. I turned off the light, and in that moment, before going back inside, I thought I saw something move. Not fast, not big, just a small shifting shadow beneath the middle of the trailer. I didn't investigate. I just locked the door and stayed up the rest of the night with every light on, heart thudding every time the wind creaked the siding. The noises got bolder. They returned night after night, sometimes louder, sometimes so faint I thought I'd imagined them. My mom thought it was stress. She told me not to worry and promised to get someone to check the crawl space when she could. Days passed. Then one evening I came home from school and found the front door open, not wide, just cracked. I stepped in slowly, calling out for my mom, even though I knew she wasn't home yet. Nothing looked disturbed, but the smell, something metallic and wet, hung faintly in the air. I followed it, cautiously, to the back door. It was locked. Everything else seemed normal. But that night, while lying in bed, I felt the trailer shift. Not a tremor, not a creak, but a steady, slow pull, like something heavy was crawling underneath, brushing against the beams. I sat up and looked at the floor. I didn't hear footsteps, just that dragging sound again. It stopped right beneath my room. I held my breath, trying not to move. Then, I heard it, a voice, a low, strained whisper. Not angry, not demanding, just pleading. Let me in. The words were so quiet, I could barely believe I heard them. But they came again. Let me in. I grabbed my phone and called my neighbor across the lot, an older man named Russ who used to help my mum with repairs. Russ came over quickly. He checked the perimeter, flashlight in hand. I watched from the porch, heart racing. Then he knelt beside the trailer, peered underneath, and froze. I asked what he saw, but he didn't answer right away. He stood up slowly, brushed off his jeans, and told me I should stay with a relative for a few days. Said there were signs someone might be living under the trailer. Scraps of cloth, scratched dirt, finger marks along the wood. Might be a drifter, he mumbled, or something else. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't ask. I just packed a bag and stayed at my aunt's house for the rest of the week. When I came back, everything was quiet again. No more dragging. No whispers. But I still checked under the trailer. Nothing there. My mom got the place sealed up, adding mesh to block off the crawl space. I tried to convince myself it had been someone playing a cruel trick, or maybe an animal mimicking sounds in a way I didn't understand. But late at night, when everything was still, I'd sometimes hear it again in memory. The slow scrape, the voice too faint for reason, asking gently to be let in. And I always wondered, what would have happened if I had said yes? I never saw a face, never caught a glimpse of eyes, but that made it worse. The unknown tends to take root deeper in the mind. I moved out eventually, but the memory clings, especially in moments of silence, when the wind blows just right, or when the house settles with a low groan. It all comes back. The trailer, the whisper, the darkness just beneath where you sleep. Whatever was under there, it wasn't just looking for shelter. It wanted something else, something more. And I've never figured out what. Some part of me believes it never left, that maybe it's still crawling under other homes, whispering through floorboards, searching for someone who won't just listen, but open the door, let it in. The thought keeps me awake some nights, even now. Not because I'm afraid of what I saw, but because I never really saw it. And sometimes, it's the things that remain unseen that haunt us the longest.